Hello and welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, the show in which three music nerds choose an album, any album. We all listen to them over the course of a period of time and come back to discuss how we feel. I'm June Lindberg. I'm here with I'm here with Brian Courtney, who just walked off when I was in the middle of doing the intro.
I had to throw away an apple.
And Chaz Jenkins.
Hello, everybody.
And today's episode is a sequel episode where we talk about albums from artists that we've already discussed on this show. Now, just for clarity's sake, I felt like I should mention this at the beginning of this episode, because this is going to be going up on YouTube because it's over a year removed from the origins of the show. So I think every artist that we're talking about today, we haven't talked about in quite some time, and those episodes aren't even going to be on YouTube. So there's not really any way to go back to see what we're talking about. I have chosen The Drones. We have Kirin J. Callinan from Brian and Andrew W.K. from Jazz. And I think we're going to start off with my pick with Havilah by The Drones, their 2008 release. Drones are an Australian punk blues garage rock outfit fronted by Gareth Lydiard, who is now in Tropical Fuckstorm. They've been around since the early 2000s. We've talked about two of their records on this show. One way back when with The Miller's Daughter, which is very noisy, very aggressive, it's just the energy. That's what that album is about. And then we talked about Feelin' Kinda Free, which was kind of a preview of the more experimental, kind of post-punk influences, maybe even some like industrial hip-hop influences that you would see on Tropical Fuckstorm. So just seeing Gareth's songwriting style change a bit. This is the first Drones record that we've talked about that's more in the vein of what they were doing throughout their entire discography. Whereas, Miller's Daughter was mostly B-sides and kind of a live sound. Havilah is more of a straightforward garage rock record with more put together songwriting, more focused effort lyrically, musically, with the song like The Minotaur that actually is one of their most well-known tracks. You're not going to get something like that on The Miller's Daughter. It's significantly less noisy, even though the guitars here still have that nice garage noise to them. It's not as off-putting. This is easily the most, I think, accessible Drones record we've talked about. And so I was interested to see what you had to think about it, Chaz. This is personally my favorite Drones record.
I was going to ask. I was wondering where this
song.
Yeah, I was wondering where this stands in the lineup.
It has just some of my favorite songs of any of their albums, and I think the flow is really, really well done. But I will wait to talk about my opinion.
All right.
Hand it over to you all.
So to give some context, my experiences with the Drones have been very hit or miss, to say the least. Way back when we did the Unhinged Albums episode with, as June mentioned, The Miller's Daughter, at the time, I thought the album was just left a lot to be desired. I'm sorry to bring up old scars, June, but I thought the album was very boring and kind of forgettable. It just was not my favorite. And then I revisited it, and it just got way worse. And unfortunately, it didn't end up as number one on my bottom five. However, with the Feeling Kinda Free record, it definitely was a step in the right direction for me. I thought some of the tracks were very interesting. However, upon reflection, I think that album has gone down a bit for me, just because in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't really a record I ever went back to, ever really thought about. This one, however, I think is definitely the best of the two that we've talked about. However, I just don't think this band is for me. I don't think it ever will be. I don't ever think it's meant to be. But given that statement, I do think that this is a pretty solid release overall. I think, taking it track by track, I think the opener, Nail It Down, is by far my favorite song of this entire band. That bass line, the tone, it's kind of like a Beatles kind of tune. I don't know if you ever got that vibe, June, but I just get a serious kind of old school Beatles, especially with that bass tone, been stuck in my head for weeks. Some of the tracks that we'll talk about on Kirin's release have been stuck in my head. A lot of Andrew's songs have been stuck in my head. Nail It Down has been in the forefront of my brain for the past 2 weeks. Cannot get it out of there. So I definitely cannot praise that track enough. I think lyrically, this album is pretty strong. I wouldn't call it cryptic, rather more mysterious. There's a lot of mysterious lyrics in this release that are very fun to pick apart. Like highlights include The Minotaur, I Am the Supercargo, The Closer, and track 9. I don't have the track list right in front of me, but...
Penumbra.
Yeah, Penumbra, which is interesting enough about the space launch, which is very cool, because on my first couple listens, I never really caught that. Then I read the lyrics, and that completely changed the I see you smirking, Brian. I completely...
It's just funny, because it just comes up a lot. It honestly, space comes up a lot for Gareth.
Yeah, he loves his space. Yeah, that was a track lyrically I thought was very interesting once I learned what it was actually about. I think my biggest issue with this album is not really the issue with the album, is more just this genre. I really don't think I like punk blues. It's just every sound of this album is like, this is fine, but will I ever listen to something like this again? Probably not. If I had to criticize the album itself, I think the pacing is a little slow, and a lot of the tracks, while distinct and have some memorable songwriting, they sound a little samey. But I do think the tone of the instruments is very crisp and nice, so I think that makes up for it in general. So I would say that's more of a nitpick, but the pacing of this album is kind of rough. The best way I could describe it is, if you've ever played Skyrim, or any RPG for that matter, and you're given a quest where you have to follow somebody, and they have a certain pace that they walk, and every time you try to walk with them, you go right past them. Like, you run way past them. So then you got to stop, wait for them to follow back with you, and then you do the same thing over again until you get to your checkpoint. That's how I would describe listening to this album. I feel like a lot of the songs really want to get going, and they never really do. But other than that, like I said, compared to the other two releases, I did enjoy this way more. There was never a track that completely ruined it for me. I do think all the songs here, some are fast, some are slow. It never really becomes one note. So overall, I think Havilah is pretty solid, but I don't know. Brian, what do you think?
As far as the drones go, this is pretty consistent in terms of songwriting quality with all of their other stuff. It's obviously a cut above The Miller's Daughter, and
absolutely
probably just as good as Feeling Kind of Free, although I do kind of prefer that record to this one. I guess the main things about this record is there are I agree, there are memorable songwriting bits. Some of the songs are great. Some of them are super awesome. Nail It Down.
Nail It Down is Super Cargo. I cannot praise that track enough.
Oh My is one of my favorite drones tracks, and has been since before I heard this record. To me, it's the penultimate track on the record, because it feels like that's what the record is kind of centered around, is humanity and their worst qualities, which is a topic that comes up for Gareth a lot. It's the best way I've heard it put is he's got this old punk aggression aged into a fine punk depression.
Yeah.
He's always been super bitter, kind of sarcastic, which is reflected in some of the instrumentation here. That guitar on the Minotaur, that riff is super sarcastic.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's completely done with everything. It's super, I don't know how to describe it, but it's sarcastic, again, is just the word I'll go back to. It's just a super sarcastic guitar line that kind of makes that song. As far as I Am the Supercargo, super great lyrics on that track. And like you said, they're a little esoteric, a little hard to pick apart sometimes, especially on some of the folkier cuts here.
Yeah.
Where, the instrumentation's a little more bare. Maybe eventually has to build to that crescendo instead of just hitting you right in the face with it like the Minotaur does. It's really good. I think it's really, really good. I don't think there's a track on here that I am disliking when it's on. I just think the way I've listened to this band's music has completely influenced what I like the most. And what I like the most is their more outlandish, their more psych rock influenced stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Their more recent outings as Tropical Fuckstorm. And their last release as The Drones. Those are the records that interest me the most. And I think it's because I knew about them first. I think this one's really good. Like I said, songwriting quality is super consistent here across every album of theirs we've heard and that I've heard on my own. The playing is good. I mean, it's produced really well. It sounds like a really good album sometimes. I don't think they were quite the experts that they went on to be with that kind of thing. I don't think this album is as heavily edited as all their other stuff.
What do you think of Gareth's vocals?
Probably my favorite quality about just that's kind of one of the things that keeps you coming back initially, I think, is how he sounds, how he writes a song. I mean, that's really all there is to it. The way the album is paced is you kind of have, I guess it's not super logically put together. I think that's a fair critique.
I don't want this to come off as like snarkish or anything, but it's a pretty consistent album. It's hard to like pick apart anything that's like inherently wrong or, you know, and there's things to like about it. I just find myself finding it difficult to come up with things to say about it. It's pretty bare bones when you get into it. It just when you compare it to the other, I know I've talked a lot of crap about The Miller's Daughter, but that is a pretty dense album. And of course, Feeling Kind of Free is the densest Drones album we've talked about, with some incredibly weird music being played there. I know, Brian, you mentioned in our first season epilogue where you said Tom and Shut is like a song that is like ahead of its time right now, like a song like that. So coming to this, it's just interesting to see this band like do so many different things, and I can respect that a lot. I know, June, I'm sorry that I've talked so much crap about this band because I know they're really important to you, and I can see why. They're doing a lot of things that are very interesting. It's just hard for me to get into the sound sometimes, but I think this one is definitely the most accessible. I would highly recommend starting with this one. Do not start with The Miller's Daughter. Whatever you do, do not start with The Miller's Daughter.
Listen up, bitches. Your time is nigh. This is my favorite Drones record because I think in part the majority of the songs here are in this garage rock, sometimes even folk rock style, with very bittersweet chord progressions, to me extremely memorable melodies and lyrical topics. This doesn't have the sheer aggression of their earlier music, with the exception of probably the Minotaur. And it doesn't have the out there weirdness of their later stuff, like Feeling Kind of Free and Tropical Fuckstorm. But to me, I feel like this is their best record from a pure songwriting perspective. It has the most songs that I come back to individually. I can perhaps understand your issue with the pacing of this record, but I think that it's essentially split up into its louder and quieter moments, with the quieter moments allowing you to take a break a little bit from the just misanthropy that's going on a little bit in the lyrics. And I think maybe that's what came off to you as having to wait for the album to start up again. But for me, those quieter moments like The Drifting Housewife, Careful As You Go, Cold and Sober, and Penumbra, those are all songs that I would never take out of this release because I feel like they're essential to be able to go from I Am a Supercargo into Oh My, which are, you know, those two tracks are both essentially just being incredibly disappointed with humanity and the choices that people make and just what people do. I think that the guitar work on this record is some of my favorite on any Drones release. The just little instrumental bits. There's a lot of interesting song structures going on here. Even with a song like Oh My, which is under 5 minutes long, I always feel like that song is longer than it is purely because it has a lot of different little moments to it that don't show up again. So you have a lot of interesting bridges on this release. You have a lot of songs that just kind of eschew the whole verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and especially on like Nail It Down, which starts as this kind of bluesy, almost romp. But then when you get into the latter half of the song, it just becomes this almost pained, very bittersweet chord progression with some fantastic vocals from Gareth, like the Old Man of Massey line. Like that's what I love about the Drones the most, is when they're able to just hit me emotionally like that. This also has my favorite Drones song of all of their songs on it. And Chaz, I don't you know, Brian, but Chaz, can you guess what my favorite track on this album is and what my favorite Drone song ever is?
It's the 8-minute long song of the album.
It's not.
Oh,
It's the closer.
Oh, really?
You're acting like the end of the world.
Would have never guessed that.
beautiful
Great closer.
acoustic folk rock song with absolutely fantastic guitar work. Just super, super, super melodic. I love the sound of the drums on that album. It has a very live sound, and when Gareth starts, like Gareth's vocals are also, it just feels like you've placed a microphone down in a room with the band as they're playing, and it just, it's catchy, it's melodic, it's lively, it's a lot of fun, but it also has a little bit of that bittersweet quality to it, which makes it basically essentially everything I like about the Drones. One of the things that I love the most about this band is how they are incorporating these folky chord progressions and song structures. And this song is like biggest example of that. It's just a straight up folk rock song with a lot of almost country-esque melodies
I wish
happening.
the Drones did more like folky stuff. Like, do they have just a pure folk album, or do they never really expand on that?
Gareth Lydiard has a solo record that is just him and an acoustic guitar.
Okay.
And it's very, very good. It's kind of maybe perhaps his best lyrical effort just in general. So I would highly recommend that one. It's definitely not as upbeat as the Drones are. It's often very sad and
Right. I
slow
figured it would be.
storytelling type of songwriting. But yeah, Havilah, this is the Drones record that I tend to come back to the most. I think it's incredibly consistent. Nail It Down, The Minotaur, I'm a Supercargo, Oh My, Luck and Odd Numbers. All of those tracks are fantastic. And even though I might not come back to the slower songs individually, I think that their placement on the album is pretty much perfect. And it has, of course, my favorite Drones track to end the record, which just puts a smile on my face every time I hear it. So for me, this is like a 9 out of 10 Drones release. I think every Drones album we've talked about for me has been like a 9. I just love this band. I think they're extremely consistent.
It feels good to end on a high note with this band. I was really worried it was just going to be another album by them that I wasn't going to like, but I did enjoy this. It's just probably not an album I'm ever going to come back to again. I'm just going to be bluntly honest about that. This band is just really not for me. But I gotta applaud them because the songwriting is consistent. There are a lot of catchy, memorable moments, and I cannot praise Nail It Down enough. And I think Penumbra is pretty sweet. I love I Am the Supercargo. That kind of sounds like Slint could have made a song like that. That's how I would describe that track. And I love the closer, too.
Yeah, and that's when I mentioned the song structures. Like, I Am a Supercargo takes you on like a whole freaking adventure, which is kind of reminiscent of Slint.
Yeah, and Oh My is very catchy too. I was glad you mentioned that track, Brian. That's a pretty solid track too. Like overall, it's a pretty solid release that's consistent, and I think the lyrics are pretty bringing it up for me a little bit. I'm thinking a light 7, like the lightest of 7s, because
delicate, feathery 7.
Yeah, I like it enough. I'm probably never going to come back to it, but it's definitely better than anything we've listened to from this band before. So, you know, that's praise in and of itself for me, because oh, The Miller's Daughter.
I think the album deserves a lot more praise than I'm giving it in the first part of the discussion, because Nail It Down is like an amazing dynamic ballad. The Minotaur is a great song. Oh My is a great song. Careful As You Go is a great song. But it's really just an album of highlights for me. And there's not a whole lot on the back half here that keeps me as energized or like as interested as I was in the beginning. But I think it's because the songs are a little more winding and just take more time to peel back and try to understand what they're about and to appreciate the more memorable lyrical moments, not for just being memorable, but for being built to, you know, just kind of a more patient listener's song structure. But in the times I've heard the leading up to this episode, they didn't like blossom for me. They just remained pretty good. So it's kind of an album of highlights for me. But I mean, you know, some of the best Drone songs are on here. So I would say I would feel a decent, strong 7. I definitely think it's better than The Miller's Daughter in retrospect, which is a record that has just almost completely grown off me. But
ridiculous. Heresy. Heresy. I swear to God. Terrible opinion.
But, you know, it's nice to see that. It's interesting for me. The most interesting thing about talking about the Drones' older stuff is just seeing how Gareth has evolved as a songwriter, because topically he's still talking about the same things, but the directions he's taking things in are much more grand. I think they've really upped the scope on these issues that they talk about, like being disappointed in humanity, and they've gone to basically a place of pure hopelessness. And it's cool to see that built too, and how the sound has changed in leading up to that. My pick is Kirin J. Callinan's Bravado, his sequel record to his, I guess his sophomore record. No, actually, there's two before that shit. Never mind. It's his third record, technically. Bravado came out in 2017. Yeah, so 4 years after Embracism, just about. Normally, I just pick a sequel episode just because I want to listen to someone more, but I feel like there's a big artistic evolution here that's been significant to his career, more significant than Embracism just is as a record. Because while I do prefer that record, and while that's my favorite record of his that I've heard, I think in a way it might be his least essential for the direction he's going, because this album is very much more a pop record, very much more has a big sense of humor on it that isn't really there on Embracism. Embracism is a lot more self-serious. And while I think you can take this album seriously, and while I think it's a serious album, it's not a joke or a novelty record, there is a sense of humor here that prevails that was not there before, and that has prevailed in Kirin's personality, his presentation, and on this record alone in his discography at this point in time, his music. Very much a unique record for its personality, for the sense of humor. You know, it's just strange. Like, it's just this weird amalgamation of tons of things of, like, you know, what is, you know, things that make a pop song good, because there's like some, not run of the mill, but like some normal pop songs on here. But at the same time, you have cuts like, you know, Down to Hang and Live Each Day and Big Enough, which is like the biggest Kirin song that has ever, most people don't even know it's a Kirin song. You know, they just know it as Jimmy Barnes screaming in the sky. So it has a song that became a huge meme, has a sense of humor all over the record, more so in the first half, and takes a completely different sonic direction than his previous record, to the point where this record probably stands out more than Embracism in the greater music canon. Like, this record definitely, I think Embracism is kind of I think records like Embracism, while that record's unique, while that record's awesome and amazing and Kirin's great, I honestly think Bravado is the more unique record of his. It has that quality over Embracism every day, because there are great songs on Embracism, but I just think the track list here is far more unique and has more personality, honestly, because I think the first record is more about the vocal performances, the interesting instrumentals, and the way that some of the topics are covered. You know, they're about these big, serious vocal. He just happens to have an amazing voice, and he's writing great songs. Whereas you get to this record, and those qualities are still there, but now the sound is its own thing. He kind of, in a way, he almost comes to his own on this record. So yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because in a way, this record isn't better than Embracism in a couple of ways. I just don't think the track list is as tight. I don't think there's not as much of an emotional impact, but the level of enjoyability is pretty much the same as far as like just track to track to track. I don't think he takes any kind of conceptual, like, you know, there's no songs that are really linked together like we saw in the last one, you know, like anything like that. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I talk about it, and the more I listen to both records, I think this one is a far more unique record, honestly.
This album is, I don't want to say a surprising shift for Kirin to make, because you do have glimpses of this pop sensibility in songs like Victoria off of Embracism. And I also, when I consider where synth pop came from, it all did kind of stem from that weird industrial synth sound that you hear a little bit on Embracism. You can't get synth pop without weirdos messing around with synths in their basement. That has to come first. So this album, while it's certainly a shift, and you have Eurodance and some like 80s dance pop type stuff, and even like some EDM influence, it's something that you can understand Kirin doing, especially with his larger than life personality. It really, really fits on these songs. And even if, you know, it's still a Kirin record, Kirin makes it still a Kirin record because he's on it. Just by virtue of being on this album, he has such a personality. I think songwriting wise, this is a really solid release. I don't love it as much as Embracism. I think in part because of that emotional connection that you mentioned. If that's just a more emotional record, that's something that I connect to. And I also think that instrumentally, I do connect to that album more, even though this album might be more of a defined statement. It's a little less all over the place than Embracism. But I think if I take it track by track here, it's pretty fantastic and pretty consistent. My Moment isn't one of my favorite songs on the album, but it does get you pumped up for the rest of the release. And then freaking going straight into Sad, S-A-D, just another song about drugs. Like, that's such a catchy chorus. I ended up really, really loving that song in particular. Down to Hang has James Chance from the Contortions. No Wave from New York in the late 70s. It's like almost semi-Junecore. And you have him with his weird, warped disco, saxophone, no wave guitar. It's very minimal. I actually didn't really notice it all that much at first. But when I kept listening to it, I was like, hold on a second. That's a wacky saxophone happening. That's James Chance.
I love the funky little like that. It's like that belongs nowhere near this song, but it's amazing.
Living Each Day is wholesome. You know, it's a straight pop banger.
It's awesome.
He had a sandwich. He had a sandwich, and he loved that sandwich. The bass and the synth breakdowns are fantastic. All of the little melodies that go throughout are great. Big Enough is strange yet epic. When Kirin says, "This dog must roam alone," I swear to God, the way he says, "must roam alone," is just like phenomenal. Freaking when he's shouting out all the religions and he gets to Judaism. It's like, yeah, I don't even know. I'm
the song is about the world is big enough for all of us. We can all love each other. It's like if Gareth Lydiard liked anything.
And it's fun coming off of an album where the cover is what it is.
He's pissing on himself.
The latter half of the album isn't as strong as the first.
You think so?
As consistent. However, it's still very good. There isn't a single song here I don't like. Family Home I do love. I do think it's a great synth pop ballad. The background vocals are pretty fantastic. Telling Me This is another good pop ballad, not quite as the same way as... Oh, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it's a really good feature from... Who is on here?
Who's on there?
George or Jorge, I'm not sure. Elbrick. There's a lot of features on this record, and they actually all go down really well.
Except the Wise Blood feature. That one's not great.
It's okay. I think that Kirin's
nothing.
vocals on that track, Friend of Lindy Morrison, are really solid.
Friend of Conan Moccasin as well.
This Whole Town is a solid track. Maybe my least favorite on the record, just the least distinct out of all of them. This album definitely has a calm before the storm of the last song. It kind of peaks with Big Enough, and then it quiets down for the next 3 or 4 tracks even.
The last song is the best Kirin song. It is amazing. It is an incredible... It's like an achievement. Like, it's like... I don't know if you could ever know how good this song is until you let other people hear it. It is far and away the best song he's ever written. It is incredible. Vocal performance, lyrical content. Just this fantastic statement on the idea of Bravado. Not necessarily a statement about the record, although maybe a little bit, but just an amazing closer. This dude is 10 for 10 on closers.
I love Kirin. And it's nice to see that both albums are just bangers in their own different ways. I do agree with both your sentiments that Embrace Them is definitely the better album. But in terms of bangers, though, I mean, Bravado comes through. So, yeah, taking it track by track just to kind of kick things off. Like I said, we've mentioned many times, this album is very different than Embracism. Embracism was had some elements of pop, as you mentioned, June, but I think the sounds were a lot harsher and the quieter moments were a lot more somber. And the lyrics on that album were way more cryptic. And while they're cryptic on this one too sometimes, it's really easy to pick apart most of the songs, like Song About Drugs or Family Home or Living Each Day. But then you have songs like My Moment, where it's really like, is he even singing about anything? But I like the tongue-in-cheek nature of it. Like you mentioned, Brian, the humor on this really makes it. My Moment is a fantastic opener. I talk about a grower. The first 3 tracks really didn't do it for me on my first listen, but each listen afterwards have really grown on me, and I've really come to really enjoy them, especially My Moment. I think the dance and techno elements utilized on this release work brilliantly.
Yeah, that's a super underrated. Yeah,
when the keyboard comes in, the dun 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 dun, it's like a classic EDM techno lead, and it's beautiful.
I love the big ass booming at the end of that song, like China.
Dude, the thumping drums, the boo boo boo. It's classic.
So good.
It's good shit.
I don't know what that song's about either.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody. I don't think Kirin knows.
I have no idea.
I don't think Kirin himself knows what that song's about. The production on this release is fantastic. Everything is clear and in your face, and it's easy to pick apart all the different instruments and moments that are being utilized. And there are different instruments being utilized. It isn't just techno. Like, trumpet shows up on a track one time. I believe it's in a Friend of Lindy Morrison. A trumpet comes in the back half of the song, really unexpected, and goes over beautifully. Sad is probably... I don't hate a song on here, but if I had to pick like my least favorite, Sad is probably my second to least favorite.
No.
It's just... I'm like the exact opposite of you.
Catchiest song on the album.
I don't think
How
it
are you
is.
so wrong.
I don't think
and
it is.
So right.
That isn't the catchiest song is Living Each Day, but I'll get to that one in a minute.
It's not. It's, well, I mean, that one's second. It's Bravado. It's Bravado. Come on.
I mean, it switches.
Easy.
Brian, it's a different answer each day for me. Right now, I'm on Living Each Day. Living Each Day is the catchiest song. Roll the blade down Beverly Hills. I can't praise that enough.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Down to Hang is definitely the most embracism track on here, and I think it's hilarious. The funky guitar tone is masterful. Masterful.
James Chance adds a lot to that track.
Yes, he does. And I love the lyrics on that. Just many metaphors for hanging. And I love the use of Jesus Christ on it, where he's like hanging like Jesus Christ. And then she's down to hang. Jesus Christ. Like, I love that. And I love the line, she turns me on like a remote. It's the most blunt line of the entire song. You can't, there's no other way to like pick that line apart. It's as blunt as it gets.
There's so many amazing gems.
Yes.
Like all over this thing.
So like I said,
like wrapped up in plastic, thrown down the stairs.
Yeah.
Feeling fantastic. That one's awesome. I love it. I can't remember what song it's on. He's like, I love you. I love you too. I think that precedes. That happens out of nowhere, and then we wrapped up in plastic, like right to it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so awesome.
So like I mentioned, the first 3 tracks really were growers on me, but I still think the album doesn't quite get started until Leaving Each Day. Like, it really finds its footing once that track hits, because I completely disagree with you, June. I think the back half of this album is when it really kicks off for me personally. We get a lot more elements of the dance and techno and the pop and the 80s kind of R&B really comes through in the back half of this album. And I think that's when Bravado really finds its footing. I love Living Each Day. It's probably my favorite song on here. Fucking love that song. I love the sentiment of it. I love the lyrics on it. Love the chorus. Great song. But you are completely right, June. The album peaks with Big Enough. A banger of a song. It is like sex when the Jimmy Barnes screams come in. It's like that buildup is literally sex. It is fantastic when he finally starts screaming. The entire album comes through on that moment. And it never, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it never reaches that point again of that just amazing epicness. Love that song. I mean, maybe Bravado. But I'll get to that in a minute. Judaism is hilarious. Every time we get to that, Judaism, I laugh. I burst out laughing. It's the funniest. It's awesome. It's hilarious. And I think that's the best guest performance. I think the Alex
Cameron.
Yes, Alex Cameron add so much to Big Enough. Their voices.
A man I know well.
So then we get Family Home. This song is gorgeous and very heart-wrenching. I think it's the most serious moment on the album for me personally. I had to really pick apart the lyrics on that one. And that voicemail part, it hits you in the gut. That is definitely for me, what was the song? Brian, the closer for Embracism.
Love Delay.
How you felt about that song is how I felt about Family Home. It's so quality.
It's just the stop you in your tracks quality.
Yes.
There's very few songs that make you stop what you're doing. You're forced. Your attention is totally fixated on it because you're just hearing it for the first time. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I can remember every, and I listen to music slower than others, but I can remember every song that has ever done it to me that is just completely whatever I'm doing is stopped. I'm whatever I'm listening to is straight up incredible.
Mm-hmm. That was Family Home.
I get what you're saying.
Family Home was astounding. Telling me this keeps the momentum going. I don't think it's I think it's just a good track on the album. I think it deserves its place. I think Kirin's vocals really shine here. That's another issue I have with this album. I think Kirin is held back a little bit on this release because of the songwriting. I feel like Embracism, he had a lot more moments to show off his singing. Here it's there in moments, especially on Bravado. And like I mentioned, Telling Me This, which is an 80s R&B track, maybe 90s R&B. Beautiful, completely belongs on this release. But I think his vocals really get to shine on there too. And Big Enough as well. And as I mentioned, that trumpet that comes in on the back half, excellent. I think the features are fantastic throughout. I do agree the weakest one is on Friend of Lindy Morrison. She's just kind of there, doesn't really add anything or take away anything.
Yeah, they don't. There's no. The great thing about the other ones is there's, as far as vocal features, there's a lot of chemistry. I feel like there's no chemistry here.
Yeah,
that really bothers me. Every time Wise Blood starts singing, and I've since her album last year was really good, and I think was, everyone liked it, etc. So it kind of made me remember what she sounds like, and now it sounds even more out of place knowing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't love that feature.
Dude, I'm kind of surprised you don't like This Whole Town. I think that's a great song, and I think that the featured artist and Kirin really vibe there too. Love that song. I think its placement of the album is really good. This whole time we're keeping the momentum going after we peaked with Big Enough. Then the album dips. I do not like Friend of Lindy Morrison. I think it's an okay track, but for me, that one feels the most indistinct. The keyboards on that are kind of cool. They sound kind of marimba-esque, but that's about it. I just think lyrically it's kind of head-scratching and doesn't really add anything. I feel like you could take that out and it would flow a lot better. I feel like the album kind of comes to a halt with that song. But I do agree that it's a good Calm Before the Storm before Bravado, which is a brilliant, brilliant closer. I don't know, Brian. I still think Victoria is Kirin's best song, but Bravado is phenomenal closer for this release. The synth wave elements really come through on that track especially. There's a little bit of vaporwave in the instrumentation on that track that I picked up. I thought was really interesting. Kind of the slowed down 80s production really comes through on that. And I think that is really cool. And I think lyrically it's hilarious and is a good period on the whole release. Yeah, overall, this album is pretty awesome. It has a lot to like about it. I just think it's not perfect. And again, Friend of Lindy Morrison really just kind of leaves me scratching my head. And the first 3 tracks took a while to grow on me, but they've since really come through. But I think from Living Each Day to Bravado, minus Friend of Lindy Morrison, is flawless. There's not a lot of complaints there, if any. And I just think the first 3 tracks really leave me worried that this album really doesn't have an identity yet, because the first 3 tracks are so different. I feel like Embracism has an identity right off the bat with its first 3 tracks, and it keeps that going till the end. But once Living Each Day hits, that worry is gone. I feel like it's consistent. It finds its identity. The dance and techno and EDM elements are beautifully utilized here, and the slower moments are heart-wrenchingly gorgeous. I love Family Home. Overall, like a strong 7. Lightest of 7s for the drones, strongest of 7s for Bravado. I still think Embracism is better, but in terms of which album I'd come back to, I don't know. Some of the songs on here are like definitely worth picking apart and listening to on their own, especially Big Enough and Living Each Day. Like that is like the peak for the release for me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
For me, I'm going to go with like a light to decent 8 on this release.
Okay.
I thought it was really consistent. Even though the back half isn't quite as good as the front, I didn't dislike Friend of Lindy Morrison as much as the two of you did. I thought the Wise Blood feature was all right, but it wasn't my favorite on the record. It might be the worst on the record, but it didn't turn me off from a song. And I thought it was a nice, very soothing instrumental. The first 3 tracks are some of the best, I think. I mean, even though My Moment isn't one I'm going to come back to on its own, I think its placement as the opener to the album is fantastic. Song About Drugs is my favorite song on the album. I think it's just super, super catchy and it's just really well written. And the whole composition is just put together so well. The production is just perfect. Big Enough is amazing. Yeah, so this is not as good, in my opinion, as Embracism, but it's very a personal thing. I think the 2 records are relatively close in quality. It's just, what do you want out of Kirin at this point?
Yeah.
And for me, I like that slightly darker, more emotional Kirin. That's really what I come back to a lot. But I can't say I'm disappointed in any way with the direction that he's gone, because it's just as interesting and it's got just as much, if not more, personality, as Brian said. So yeah, this is a great record.
I think more personality. I think a sense of humor that really sets it apart. I think a sound that sets it apart more than Embracism did. Yeah, just another fantastic Kirin record. And he just continues to impress no matter what he does. It's this kind of evolution that keeps you wanting to listen to an artist. Because if he had just made a second Embracism, I think he would have pigeonholed himself and it would have been worse. So I think it's nice to see him have changed it up. Because while that first record is a fantastic record, I don't think it's as unique as this one. And I think that change, combined with just the skill in songwriting and production that was demonstrated on Embracism, continuing on to this record, but having that change that makes it more unique, makes it rival Embracism in quality. So yeah, I'm feeling like a strong 9.
So the album I picked is the 2018 triumphant return by Andrew WK, an artist that we have referenced a few times but haven't truly discussed since our very first episode, which feels like a lifetime ago. You're Not Alone, like I mentioned, is his 5th studio album and is a true return to form for Andrew. While I think that his discography is pretty consistent and has some interesting moments in it, especially like a piano album, 55 Cadillac, it was clear that Andrew really was having trouble finding a direction or where he wanted to go with his music. And he stopped releasing music for a while since 55 Cadillac, which was not... Well, his last album was Gundam Rock, which was released all the way back in 2009. So it's been a long time since he's released music. He did come out with an EP in 2011, which features the Oh off Ever Again. So he definitely was working with some sounds that would end up on this release. But You're Not Alone is basically the mythos of partying. June, I find it interesting that way back in our discussion with I Get Wet, his debut album, which I think we can all agree is a perfect album, you mentioned that partying is more of a lifestyle rather than just something that he's singing about, like not just partying, it's sort of a lifestyle. And that is really explored on this release. This is very motivational, very, you could say cringy, kind of like a guest speaker at a high school pep rally cringy, but it works so well with Andrew's persona. I love his message of just being yourself, following your dreams, and you will accomplish your goals.
Partying.
It works so well. It's a little bloated. However, I think every track justifies being on here in some way, as we'll get into it. And I mean, I don't want to give too much about how I feel about it, but I think this album is just so triumphant and is really just Andrew finally making an album that, like, from front to back, it just kicks all types of ass. And honestly, in some ways, I think it's better than I Get Wet. And in some ways, I think I Get Wet is better than You're Not Alone. But what did you guys think?
This is
Yeah!
a fun album. It's a nice album. Makes me want to party.
Yeah!
Partying. Party, 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 party.
Andrew WK.
Party, 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 party.
9 years away. Decade, basically.
We missed him. We needed him.
I thought this was going to be some kind of poetry. Andrew WK, 9 years away.
That's a bar. Back. And good.
So fucking
And
good.
very good.
So fucking good.
Amazing. Evolution since his first record. Sort of. Bigger songs. Totally different philosophy. Same energy. Same positivity. Same character. Same instrumental. Same kind of a little more grand. Production, same. Basically
No, the
the same.
production's less brickwalled.
Shut up. It's different or the same. Whatever I said. Look, the point is, it's really good.
There's more instrumentation. The songs have
Pianos.
Songs have piano. Yeah, there were pianos on the first record too.
Is great.
This album is more complex from a song structure.
Oh,
It also has-
my God. The compositions. Oh.
It has more tender, softer vocal performances.
Wow.
You don't get those. Do you remember those? You don't. They didn't happen. It was all scream, all party. But now he's singing a little bit. He's doing a little singing.
Hey, and he has these there's like 3 of them on the album, little spoken word.
Love
in a
them.
very Midwestern
That divide-
accent.
and
In a
it actually-
very Midwestern accent.
Oh,
AWK comes out.
Shockingly.
A shockingly
That
Midwestern
first story really is like eye-widening. But they actually divide the record up really nicely. They actually kind of premeditate, and I think the intro does this too, although it's not a spoken word bit. They give you, what the next section of songs is going to be about, via TPAB, very TPAB.
Clearly, Andrew and Kendrick were kind of discussing, and Kendrick said, I'll release my album first, then you wait 9 years and released yours. And Andrew was like, I can respect that, Kendrick.
Yeah. And then Kendrick gave him an N-word pass. It was awesome.
What the fuck? Where the fuck
Only
did that
you.
come from? Where did that even
That's
come
what
from?
happened. That's the events that took place.
It's
Sure,
it's
yeah.
all history. It's on the Wikipedia page. Did you not read it?
You can look this up. You will look this up and find it to be true.
Very good songwriting across the board. Very catchy. There isn't a moment on the album that I am bored. And for a 50-plus minute album, that's pretty impressive. I do agree that it's bloated and that it could have used a little bit of cutting.
I don't know. I think Andrew it needed to be bloated. Andrew had a lot to say, and he was not going to strip it back. And I respect the hell out of that. Because everything is justified here. There's not a single track you could convince me needs to be cut.
Not a big fan of that phrasing.
Andrew needed to be bloated.
Yeah.
He's not, though. He's ripped as fuck.
I think that this is just an overwhelmingly wholesome record, even
it's
though
the
I don't
steroids.
love every single song on here. I'm looking at the track listing now. There isn't any song on here that I don't at least really like. And there are a few on here I love. I love Music is Worth Living For, Ever Again. I love I Don't Know Anything.
Yes!
I think that's just a really good, positive track that's just basically about like, accept what you don't know and just try to do better. Try to be open to learning. I think that's a great one. Keep On Going is really good. I love the closer, the title track.
Mm-hmm.
I love his vocals on that song.
I think that the novelty of the Andrew WK persona is gonna totally and from just this dude should be loved. This should, and he is, and I love him.
He's a national treasure.
This should be like renowned, not because he's making like amazing, like just oh my god, he's changed the face of rock. He has his own sound in rock. It's not, it's not incredible for its innovative qualities. It's loud. It's super triumphant. It's got like power metal vibes, like big, huge, like
Arena rock.
Right. It's just a huge sound. So it's not anything new. But through this character and through this, in the same way that Kirin has, through this lens that he is operating in, like through this persona, he is able to convey things like music is worth living for and total freedom and I don't know anything in a way that no other artist does. And the problem is no one's going to write off Kirin because what he's doing is still kind of strange and out there. But people are absolutely going to write off Andrew WK because they think it's cheesy or stupid. And there's a phrase that Kirin says. There's a mantra for his music. And this is a mantra for life. Just because something is funny doesn't mean it's a joke. And to me, this record, while it's awesome and it's like, yeah, and like it makes you, it's super positive and it is kind of, and the WK character is hilarious. It is funny. It's meant to be funny. It's kind of like this bead of positivity just buried in like boulders of awful. Like he is such an incredible force and he's never, and I feel like he just doesn't get that recognition like I want him to.
Facts.
Because this record,
facts.
I don't think anyone sees this record as conceptual, but it kind of is. Like it's broken up into different sections about like, okay, how can I take this character and put it through this lens? The meaning of partying has basically entirely changed on this record. It's a different word. Like it's not about actually partying was about partying on I Get Wet. I'm going to say it like Andrew. Partying was about partying on I Get Wet. It was all party all the time. But partying on You're Not Alone is more like, it's a lot of things. It's a complex word. Like it really, and it sounds ridiculous and it is hilarious. But that is legitimately so awesome and so unique. And he just really does not get that kind of credit. And the more I listen to him and the more, not like backlash, it's the more people dislike Andrew WK, which is totally fine. You're not like it's subjective, it's art. And I get that it's not going to be for everyone because there are things that people like that I feel similarly about, but it makes me love it even more. It makes me, I push it even harder. Like, it's like I'm just further into this echo chamber inside of my own head. That's like, no, this is awesome. And it only gets more awesome. I heard this record when it came out and I was like, because we had heard I Get Wet and I was like, oh my God, this one's really good too. But like the more I go back to those records, and especially this one, they only get better.
Facts.
Because you just start to get more out of it, more than just like, oh, these songs are super triumphant. Yeah, they feel good. I don't know. For me, I think it's more complex than it appears on the surface. And it's just never going to get that kind of credit because I feel like that is such a hot take. I feel like no one looks at it that way or sees that or really gets that out of it. I just wish they would get it and understand it. God, it's good.
It's so
great.
good. It is. I love this album. And
Let's just name the tracks I love. This is my poem. Tracks I love on this album. We're just going to go top. We're just going to read them through.
All right.
Power of Party.
Party.
Ever Again. I Don't Know Anything. Party Mindset. Keep On Going. Total Freedom. Beyond Oblivion, You're Not Alone. That's almost every track. And the other ones, let's go through the ones I love the second most. It's just all the other tracks. Like, it's just all the other ones. There's not a bad song. There's not a boring song. It's just straight up, it's kind of incredible. It's actually kind of incredible. Yeah, I don't know. You all talk. I'm done.
Well,
This is great.
So, June, I wanted to know, before I go on my big spiel about why this album is fucking awesome, you gave I Get Wet like a 7, I think. I don't know if it was a strong or decent or light 7.
Yeah, I
Bullshit,
liked it
by
a
the
lot.
way.
I liked it a lot.
Do you like this one more, less, about the same? How do you feel?
I think I might like this one a little more. I think that I vibe with the slightly more complex song structures, a little more of a slightly more full arrangements. Even though, like, it's weird for me saying that as someone who really appreciates simplicity and minimalism.
Like the Raincoats.
Like, as a punk fan, right? Just like really simple. Like I'm a huge fan of like Young Marble Giants and all that. But for me, just it adds, I think, to the triumphant and wholesome vibe from this album when you have all of this extra, all the piano and the strings and everything happening. I think that it just adds to the vibe, and it just kind of sells Andrew WK's whole philosophy of the world, which is wonderful. So for me, I do love most of the song. Well, not most. I like a lot most of the songs here. This still isn't the style that is entirely for me. I still do think that it's a bit long. I still do think that it could be a little more consistent on the track listing. And it makes me feel bad to say that because I do love so much what this album is saying.
That wasn't very party of you, June.
Oh, God. But where this album is fantastic, it's totally, completely fantastic. And my favorite songs on here, I'll probably go back to more than my favorite songs from I Get Wet.
That's fair. All right. I got a literal page.
You better pull through for me. You better.
I've got a list of shit to say about this album.
What do you think? Do you think it's better than I Get Wet?
I think it is. I think it is.
That is.
I think it is because here's the thing.
So too.
I Get Wet is amazing, and it's a childhood favorite, and it's gotten so much better with time. Like, 2001 was not nice to that album, and it's kind of a disgrace how it was just written off as a joke, but man, it's really come into its own limelight recently, and it's so awesome to see an artist mature. But I just want to go through these notes because they all explain how I feel about this album pretty well. First off, this intro is fucking epic. It is probably the most epic thing we've ever listened to on this show. Not a
party. No.
It's party. Bum 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 bum. The horns, the strings, the classical epic orchestra, like Two Steps from Hell style, like music, is beautiful and used so well on this release. The compositions. A lot of Andrew's compositions have been getting more and more ambitious, and they started getting more ambitious in his second album, The Wolf, and Close Calls with Brick Walls. However, I think these are his most ambitious to date. The songwriting here is phenomenal, and they're so catchy. I found myself just getting it's a different song each day that I'm getting stuck in my head. It might be I Don't Know Anything one day. It might be Give Up on You or Keep on Going or Ever Again.
You gotta break the curse, dude.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think
the curse is fantastic.
Who put a curse on you. A curse so bad, it cursed me too. And then there's I forget what the other part is.
Scammed you. Look who scammed you. Or that's another line.
No, I don't remember that part.
Thanks for derailing Chaz's thought.
I just thought it was important.
The singing,
very important to say.
I think this is, like you mentioned, Andrew does actually sing, and it's gorgeous. Like, it's it works so well with the music, and it's kind of ambitious.
He doesn't have. I wouldn't go gorgeous. He doesn't have.
No, I think
an angelic voice.
That's not what I'm saying though. But with the music, it really is beautiful, and it's nice to see him like really go for it a lot of times. And I think it more than most goes over well on a lot of the songs where he does sing, and I do really appreciate that because, like we mentioned, I Get Wet. It's more a lot of like deep throat yelling and chanting. Here though, it's way more melodic. I love the transitions on this album. They're so smooth and really show that this is an album listening experience. Andrew had a clear vision with the track listing, how each song flows into the next. It's masterful. The transition between the power partying and into Music Is Worth Living For is awesome. The transition into track 7 into track 8 is awesome. Yeah, there's so many transitions throughout the album that work so well. The first 3 tracks of this album, flawless. Banger after banger after banger. Music Is Worth Living For to I Don't Know Anything is masterful. You cannot ever tell me otherwise. I don't think I've ever had that 1, 2, 3 punch since Full Speed Ahead. And I think this one tramples that one because the energy is at 100 by I Don't Know Anything. And like Brian said, we kind of take a break with a spoken word moment. It's perfectly placed.
It sets up the next tracks. Just like the first track here, we've nothing new, partying. But partying now means something else, represented in the 3 tracks that follow afterward.
And I
then
love
you get
that
the first spoken word bit that sets up the next set of tracks.
I love that.
And that happens again.
Yeah.
It happens at the end, right before the final song. Like on that final one, he's literally talking about the philosophy of the last song before you hear it.
Mm-hmm. And
he's
does
basically
that,
explaining the joke.
He does that again before The Devil's on Your Side. I love that partying does have many different philosophical meanings, but he explains them each in these spoken words, which sets up the next couple of tracks. It's amazing. Ever Again slaps so hard. That chant, could hear that forever. You could play that on an endless loop and I would never get tired of it.
I love that the OOO is a very dangerous venture because it's either going to be awful or it's going to be amazing.
It's either going to be like the most irritating thing.
It's honestly like a bigger risk than like if tomorrow Kendrick Lamar came out with like a synth pop record or some shit. You know what I mean? Like it's a bigger risk than that. And it will destroy your song.
It goes over so well. It's really
amazing.
Does.
And one of the best tracks.
The bridge where it's like in the background, that big scream where he's like, ever again, and it holds that note. Amazing. Gorgeous. I love that lyrically, you can meme all day and say, oh, these lyrics aren't, that cryptic or that meaningful. Shut it. You're a smooth brain if you think that. Lyrically, this is Andrew's most mature work.
Oh my God.
This is Andrew's
You're not a smooth brain. Party foul. That's what it is. That's a party foul.
Party. That's a really,
I don't even understand what you're saying, June.
I think lyrically,
I have no idea.
This is Andrew's most mature work. There are some really interesting topics and songwriting that he is lyrically that he's dealing with here, and I think they go over really well. The catchiest song is by far I Don't Know Anything, though. That is by far the catchiest song. What's really interesting to me is that religion is brought up a few times in the lyrics throughout the album, which I think plays into the party mythos now. I never really saw Andrew as a religious man, but I think it's interesting that he touches upon it. I do appreciate, though, that it doesn't come off as preachy or anything. I think it's just his own eternal struggle with what he's dealing with when it comes to that topic.
I think he's just using those. I think he's just using religious figures as like metaphor. I don't think it's really like a faith-based thing. I think it's just him using them as metaphors, or he's just taking artistic liberties with those things. I don't think he's necessarily.
And I think it works in him. It works in the context of the album. I think. I love Party Mindset. It gives me like a Beach Boys and Kiss kind of vibe. It'd be like if the Beach Boys and Kiss collabed on a track, because it's got like this sing-along chanty like Beach Boys Party Mindset, but the song, it's like a Kiss could totally make a track like Party Mindset.
Some of this album honestly makes me think like if Bon Jovi was good. A little bit. You know what I'm
Yes.
talking about?
I get exactly what you're talking
I'm
about.
not really into Bon Jovi, but if I liked Bon Jovi, it would sound like this.
I don't know. I feel like Bon Jovi could never write a song like Total Oblivion or Beyond Oblivion.
Right. That's what I'm saying. If Bon Jovi was good.
He would write that song.
Party Never Dies is probably my least, like I'm putting this in quotations, least favorite song. It's a little samey, like it sounds very similar to I Don't Know Anything. However, like I mentioned, every track justifies being on this release. The instrumental breakdown near the tail end of that track is amazing. I love that. So again, it deserves a place on the album. The choir parts and Give Up On You, beautiful. Keep On Going hits so hard, and the instrumental breakdown of that track near the end is amazing. The songwriting, the composition, it just blows my mind that no one has asked Andrew to like compose an original soundtrack for their movie yet. How has nobody asked Andrew to like compose their big summer blockbuster yet?
I mean,
He would kill.
You see him get kind of conceptual on Gundam Rock, you know? Like he has kind of explored that sound before, I think.
Right, but I'm just saying like
Not that sound, but that idea.
he could kill at like being a movie composer. He really has the knack for it. Track 10, that spoken word part, clearly Andrew's been playing some Kingdom Hearts when he's talking about that the darkness is just as necessary as the light. A sentiment that is like all over that video game. And it leads into The Devil's on Your Side. The instrumental breakdown is the best on this release. Like this track has the best, like the it just keeps going and going. I'm like, come on, Andrew, where are we going? Like, how many times are we going to do this? It's amazing. I love the message of that song. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of sentiment explored in music before, at least from the music that I've heard. So it's very interesting to see it on this release, and I think that will turn a few heads for anybody who is willing to listen to this, because it's not something you usually hear talked about a lot. I mean, the sentiment of like darkness is as necessary as the light is, but in terms of like the religious twist on it with the devil, I think it's very interesting. And I think that shows that maturity of the songwriting and lyrics.
I think it's super simple. I think it's a super simple comparison.
I mean,
to
yeah,
draw.
it's simple,
but I just
but
think that's the MO of the WK. You know, it's not this complex. He's not saying anything that complex. It's
Right,
just the
right.
way that
That's
he's
not what I'm saying,
it and
though.
The music around it.
I'm not saying it's like this big, grand, complex thing, but for Andrew WK to write a song like this, it's very cool and shows growth. It shows much growth. That's why it makes me think that this is better than I Get Wet. The sounds and instrument used in Break the Curse are awesome. That is like when the wall of sound really works in this album. Love Break the Curse. And again, another great instrumental breakdown. I saw a review of this album that like someone was like, man, I hate all the instrumental moments. And I'm like, you're high if you think that those aren't the best parts of the album. They go over so well and show so much growth and skill. Andrew, as a composer, is pretty astounding. And Total Freedom is arguably the best song in the whole album. Like, it's not my favorite, but it's the best song in the album.
Thank you. That is a fantastic song. That is an amazing song.
That's when Andrew's
It's
vocals.
a good song, but it's like one of my not favorites.
Why? Why do you think
love
that?
Because
it's one of the only ones that's like reserved, you know, and
His vocals are
doesn't
beautiful.
I think it's the most standard pop song on the record. It reminds me more of like Coldplay than anything else in terms of the melody.
I don't get that.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a good song. It's a good melody, but it definitely doesn't have the pump up energy that the rest of the songs here have. I like it. It's a good track, but it's not one that I'm going to come back to over I Don't Know Anything.
That's really
music is worth looking for or anything.
I mean, I think Andrew's vocals really shine on that track. It's like truly when we hear him as a singer, and I think it's beautiful. I honestly like that track. I'm left speechless. And then of course right into that, fucking Beyond Oblivion is phenomenal. Holy shit. And then honestly, we get the same problem that I had with I Get Wet. I think the ending on this album is a little weak. I really did not like how it ends. I love You're Not Alone, and it's a great closer, but the end of that track, the ending of the album, it's just a power chord let go. I was expecting like a big grand moment to finish us off, and the same thing happens in I Get Wet. I think I Get Wet should have ended with the title track, because I think I Get Wet is such a strong song. It's his best song. It's his best song, period. And that ending the album would have been a lot better, make more sense. And here, I thought I was going to get that, and no, it just ends kind of weak. But I guess you could say that's more of a nitpick, but I don't know, for this big, grand, epic concept album that goes through all these different themes and tells what like the philosophy of partying is, for it to end just kind of one note, I don't know. I was really expecting something more. I think that's my biggest criticism. And I think the production is a tad weak. I just think the production could have been stronger on this. But that doesn't take away anything how I feel. This is a decent fucking 9 out of 10. I fucking love You're Not Alone by Andrew WK. I love this artist. You're Brian. Man, sometimes you say some shit and then sometimes you spit facts. You were spitting major bars when you're saying that Andrew needs more recognition. Big facts.
Brian, sometimes you say some shit. Sometimes you're just on some bullshit. Maybe most of the time. Okay, I'm gonna go with like a decent 7. I really, really like this album. I think I like it better than I Get Wet. And Andrew WK is cool in my book.
9.
Is that all?
I give it a party out of 10.
Nice.
Very good.
A party
very
out of
good.
party. All the letters of party, all uppercase.
And that concludes this episode of Unwarranted Music Opinions, where we have a rant about Andrew WK. After long last, he was on our first episode, and now we are however many in, almost a year removed from that first episode. Next time is going to be a themed episode. We're going to be talking about video game soundtracks. I have chosen a classic. I couldn't really think of one that I wanted to do, so I went with an easy pick, but I think it's going to be interesting to talk about all of these albums as just albums rather than in the context of the video games that they are associated with. So I'm going with Koji Kondo's Super Mario 64 soundtrack.
I'm doing the Last of Us soundtrack, composed by Gustavo Santaolalla.
Sort of, almost.
It's like you're bailing out on the second set of L's, because like your brain, your stupid Yankee brain just wants to say la la.
I will be doing another classic, the Parappa the Rapper soundtrack, composed by Messiah Matsura. I'm very excited. And we'll be doing something a little different here on Unwarranted Music Opinions. Fan submission. That's right, for the video game soundtrack episode, we had a fan, in this case my girlfriend Katrina Allman, pick an album for us to review, and she has chosen the Sims 3 soundtrack, composed by Steve Jablinski.
That is the most Sims last name I've ever heard in my life.
All right, this has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I have been June Lindberg.
That absolutely says Jablonski. That is an O, as a big fat O. What? That's my outro. We're done. Chaz, your turn. Say goodbye.
Party, 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 party.
See y'all next time.